Okay, great. Hey everyone. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started because we're already a little late. As I explained earlier, this is originally going to be me and Arik had a conflict, so I'm gonna try and do like setup for the problem, kind of explain what's happening, give you kind of an overview of the problem space, and hopefully by the time I've gotten through that article and magically appeared and need help walk through the math. If not, I've got some math on a piece of paper to go through together. It's very fun and exciting. Okay, great. So welcome everyone. What we're talking about in this session for the next hour and 20 minutes is going to be Taproot, specifically Taproot as it applies to the problem of lightning, so to speak. So I'm going to give hopefully what is a sort of introduction to the problem, kind of some of the challenges and difficulties, the points that lightning that need to change in order to make Taproot happen. And then we can maybe take a look at like what the proposal has been for Taproot, the existing implementation that the LND and LDK teams have been collaborating on building, and start to maybe go through some of the math and logic behind why nonces are such a difficult thing to do, etc. I also got some notes here and pull them up about what to talk about. So this is a reverse engineering Taproot on Lightning project, so to speak. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and just open up to my classic thing, lightning talk. Can everyone see this? This is beautiful. Like, hello. Is that beautiful?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so Taproot. Well, first of all, okay, so before we can really start, I feel like in order to really understand, where are the points that Taproot touches lightning, maybe we do like a kind of a short overview of where scripts get written into lightning, right? So what Taproot is doing, so what are the goals of having Taproot on lightning, right? Like what does that even mean? Well, Taproot does anyone know what Taproot is? Taproot is a update to the way that we're able to lock Bitcoin up on chain, right? And so this means we got new scripts. Also means that along with the new scripts, what else do we get? Does anyone else know what we got in addition to new scripts? Schnorr, which is a signing algorithm that we call it. We got a new signing algorithm. The much awaited promised land of Schnorr signatures, right? Okay, so when Taproot got added to Bitcoin in November 21, so was that almost 2 years ago, we got a whole new scripting, whole new kind of version of Bitcoin. Script got activated. There's only a few tweaks to like old school scripts, but we also added in a new way of checking and so signing and verifying signatures, right? And so now we're using a brand new algorithm called Schnorr, which replaced the old one. Does anyone remember what the old signing algorithm was? ECDSA, elliptic curve, digital signature algorithm. I love how like generic that is. It's like, yeah, we're gonna do the curve digital signature algorithm. That's cool. And now we're moving to Schnorr, who's named after Mr. Schnorr. Fun trivia fact is that the reason we didn't originally get Schnorr in Bitcoin is that there was a patent out on it for a very long time. I feel like people say that the patent expired about the year before Bitcoin got implemented, but at the time, I think most of the currently in use cryptography packages, like OpenSSL, for example, didn't have an implementation of it, so they used the currently available one, which was easy to say. Okay, cool. This is some background on Taproot. Great. Okay, so now that we've got these new things in Taproot went live. Okay, the question then becomes, how does this impact Lightning, right? So okay, why does Lightning care? So I don't know why Lightning should care about all this new stuff. One of the cool things is that updating to Taproot. So why should we, so how does Taproot work? How does Lightning, maybe in order to motivate why Lightning cares, we need to talk about what Lightning does currently, right? So how does Lightning work currently?
We can put the fallbacks into script leaves.
Right, so yes, someone says font something into script leaves. Something into script leaves. Sorry, I made a whole thing. Into script leaves. Okay, but maybe we can kind of motivation. So how does Lightning work currently, and why do we care about having all this new stuff? So Lightning currently works with the way that Lightning currently works is in order to put money into the Lightning channel, we have to touch the main chain, right? You have to make a Bitcoin transaction, right? Inside that Bitcoin transaction, you have to make an output, which spends to what? That spends to a multi-sig. Just so happens that the multi-sig is a 2 of 2, right? Okay, so that uses script. So, Lightning cares because we use script, right? We use script currently. We use script, so a new version of doing script is kind of cool. In that script, we're doing a multi-sig, which is a 2 of 2. A multi-sig with 2 of 2 has signatures in it, right? So it seems like there's some opportunity there. We also use signatures, right? So maybe there's an opportunity for us to update to the newer signatures. A new opportunity to update to this new way of doing signatures. Great, okay. So one of the things about script prior to, or signatures and scripts prior to Taproot, right, is that you had to, whenever you spend a script, you have to put the script on chain. So when I spend a 2 of 2, I have to show everyone that that was a 2 of 2 spend, right? Is okay? Does that make sense? So you have to show that it was a 2 of 2 spend. So that means in some way, so how many protocols are there on Bitcoin that use 2 of 2? Answer is not a lot, right? Really it's kind of just Lightning, right? So Mempool Space even kind of clued into this at some point and they're like, hey, if it's a 2 of 2 spend, you know what we're gonna guess that is? It's a Lightning output, right? So it becomes this way that anyone who wants to can kind of track what they think are Lightning spends. And there's some other things that Lightning does, depending on how it goes to chain, that makes the you being able to guess that it's a Lightning output a lot easier than just looking at the 2 of 2s, but it's kind of one place to start, right? As if there's 2 of 2 protocols on chain, right? Okay, so it'd be kind of cool if we can hide the 2 of 2-ness, right? Cool. Is that it? Is that the only thing? The other thing that Lightning does currently, it would be kind of nice to be able to fix or update. So one thing that Lightning does currently is we make Bitcoin transactions on chain. It would kind of be nice to make those Bitcoin transactions and outputs that we're using on chain to make Lightning work, blend in more seamlessly into the rest of the on-chain outputs, etc. And so Taproot is one way that we can do this, so that's pretty exciting. Another thing about Lightning and the way that it currently works, it's sort of related to going on-chain. Is currently when you make a payment on Lightning. Payments on Lightning. So when you make a payment, currently the way that you keep track of a payment across every node to node, we use something called a hash, right? We use hashes to keep track of payments. These are typically we kind of do the way you might have heard these referred to as HTLCs. How many people have heard of HTLCs before? How many people have made an HTLC? So everyone who's ever paid anything on Lightning or received money on Lightning should have their hand up, right? Cool. And so the thing about HTLCs is that generally speaking, an HTLC will get passed from node to node. But one of the issues here is that the hash is static between nodes, right? So if I have a payment and I want to pay someone at the back table, I'm going to have a hash object that I'm going to make to send that payment, and I'm going to send that hash. Let's say I can't make it directly back to the back table. I have to send my payment through a couple of hops. So I have to have a hash that I tell every single table on the way to the back table about that hash, right? So every node along the route, and every node along any failed route as well, right? So anytime I try and send that payment, maybe I'll try and send it this way, it'll fail halfway before getting there and come back. Every node that touches that payment, so definitely a subset of the entire Lightning graph, but not one, right? So there's definitely going to be kind of this ephemeral trail that individually nodes shouldn't have, as long as they're not like collaborating and telling everyone what hashes they've seen. This is a fairly decent way of doing things, right? But if it's for some reason some nodes or subset of nodes are sharing what hashes they've seen, all of a sudden you start to get an idea of the path that a payment took through the nodes to reach its destination, which sort of leaks origination and destination information if you get enough people kind of sharing this information in aggregate, right? It also means that if sometimes, for the most part, these hashes stay kind of this private information between nodes, but occasionally there's certain cases where they end up being written into the chain and become public information. So any node along the route or along a failed route will be able to see kind of where that ended up if and when it goes to chain, right? Okay. So basically, currently we have shared data that is like semi-public or semi-private is maybe a better word for it, that depending on how well the nodes that send it through regarding their data, etc., could become a way of identifying payments moving across the network, etc. Okay, what does Taproot have to do with any of this? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. Taproot is a kind of a prerequisite. So Taproot is a prerequisite. So just updating to Taproot won't get us this. We're gonna have to do some more work, and there's currently some really smart protocol developers that are working on prototypes of how this might work. But we're going to need to update the way that we track payments. And the way that we're going to do that is going to need Schnorr, right? So we're gonna need Schnorr able to do this. So it lets us make tweaked signatures. So we're gonna need some tweaked signatures is my understanding of this. And the new fancy name for the new version of this that people are working on doing is PTLCs, right? So instead of a hash, it's a point. Point time locked contracts is the kind of updated name for that. Where point is a BCDSA, not BCD, elliptic curve point. So instead of using a hash, we're now going to be using differentiated points. So every hop along a payment path will get a different point. So if 2 or 3 or 4 different nodes tell you what the point was that the payment was associated with, every single node along the hop had a different point, right? So this is kind of a really important preliminary update, or this is a really important update in terms of making payments that you make more private just across the, as they move through the network, right? So you kind of lose this correlatability between different points, nodes, etc. Okay, so I think, maybe I'm wrong, I think these are the 2 things that we're working on, adding, updating, etc. Does there anyone know of anyone that I missed? I think these are the 2 big ones, though. We want to make opens and closes on chain harder to differentiate, and we want to make it such that whenever we have messages that are moving through the network, you're not able to know what relation that has to any other thing. I think there's a hand here.
Yeah, you want to hide the punishments, or more appropriately, you want to hide the ability for those punishments if they're not actually used. Because part of the fingerprint that you're leaving behind is when you're closing a channel, especially if you're non-cooperatively closing it, you're revealing all the things that could happen, including the punishment protections, and that is hey, this is a lightning force close.
Right. Yeah.
You can only partially hide it. If the punishment happens, it's going to be visible. But if it doesn't happen, you can say, oh no, this was just an on-chain transaction that somebody else swept it.
Right. There's still some.
But it's all.
Yeah, this is not as clear of a benefit. It's not one I thought all the way through, but sorry to do that. Cool. So yeah, so more hiding on chain stuff. Yes. Less costly, less expensive, and it's less expensive because we're writing less stuff onto the network, right? Less expensive, which is great. Everyone wins. Cool. Okay, so more privacy, less expensive. just kind of, I mean, it kind of makes sense that you have less data that you're writing on the chain, it costs you less money. Less data also means there's less signal for people to pick up on, right, figure out what you're doing. So Taproot kind of has this nice double sort of like handshake, privacy and saving money on chain kind of go hand in hand. So you have less information that you're putting out there, which means you have less stuff you have to pay for. Okay, great. So everyone kind of has a good understanding of what we're doing, where we're going, why we're going there. Okay, let's talk about how we're doing it. So, Taproot. So let's kind of like focus first. The PTLC stuff is like unspec'd or is like in the process of being specified. So I'm gonna kind of like, for the rest of this talk, we're really just gonna focus on the current, specifically kind of the current project, which is the simplified, I think simple Taproot channels is what the proposal is called. And kind of talk about what the general, what do you call it? Kind of like what is the general outline, what are the problems that we're solving with this like first proposal, etc. Okay, so we've got Taproot, we've got Schnorr, we've got some new scripting stuff. There's some decisions we need to make. So okay, so we want to change. Our goal now is we want to change the pay to witness script hash, pay to witness script hash to multi-sig. That is the current channel open script, right? And we want to move it to Taproot. So we have some decisions to make here, right? Make sense? Okay, so we've got to it's a SegWit script. We want to move it to Taproot. So we need to start making some decisions about this. What kind of decisions do we need to make? Well, the first one is like, what kind of script are we going to use? So we have some options on this, right? Does anyone know what so we have our goals, or our goal is we want a 2-of-2 script or way of multi-sig, basically. Multi-sig on Taproot. So we've got some options, unfortunately, right? Unfortunately, being like, sometimes it's nice if there's like one way to do things, and okay, we'll just do it that way. Taproot is kind of cool, it gives us a lot of different ways of doing things, but we have to like pick which of those is the one. So for Taproot, does anyone know kind of what they do? That's just kind of like two options in particular that I'm thinking of. Maybe you guys have other ones. Does anyone have any suggestions for what a 2-2 on Taproot, how we do that?
Music.
Okay, music, specifically music 2, right? Because I think the original music is broken. It's broken for a reason that we're going to get into in a little bit about how nonce stuff works. Just kind of a fun thing because music 1 is broken. And then the other way you can do it, does anyone know what like the other way of doing it, the multi-sig on Taproot might be? There's actually another way to do this. Yeah, so you can use script in a script tree, right? And call it a mask, basically. So it's a script spend on Taproot. So specifically, we use the new opcode, which is check save at, right? So there's some options. And then maybe, I don't know, how many of you guys have heard of Frost? We could in theory use Frost, right? Maybe. Okay, so, all right, let's talk about this. Which of these helps us achieve our goals, so our goal is to do multi-sig on Taproot, right? This is what we're trying to do. Which of these ones gets us the closest to that the fastest? Or like the most easy? Okay, so having it written into a script would be pretty easy to do. The nice thing about writing it into a script is that there's like something that, as we'll see shortly, I'm going to call it a nonce problem. We don't have to worry about the nonce problem. This goes away if we there's no nonce problem really anymore because we don't have to create an aggregate nonce for these. So one of the nice things about this is we don't no need for an aggregate nonce. So we can kind of remove a lot of the coordination that's required. Hey, Arik, how's it going? Come on up. We're getting into we're picking how we're going to do multi-sig on Lightning is the current topic of discussion. Talking through our options, we have 3 options on the the whiteboard is kind of hard to see. The 3 options. One is we could use music 2 to do 2 on a multi-sig. On Taproot, we could use a script and a mask. or we use Frost. Does anyone know, so what's the downside to this though, is you still have to reveal. So one downside to this is it's still more data, right? More data still, you're still writing more data, and the reason it's more data is you still have to write the script into the blockchain. Then you still have to do a script reveal, right? So there's still like a script reveal on this one. One of the goals of moving to Taproot, right? So you reveal it's a multi-sig. Cool. Okay. That's an option, right? So that's one. So then we can kind of look at these two, MOSIG2 and Frost. Does anyone know what the difference is between these? Oh, no. Frost lets you do threshold signatures, right? So this is I could do 2 of 3, or I don't know, 7, 5 of 7, 7 of 9, or I don't know, I gotta use this, right? 1,000. I know it's freaking out. I don't know how to make it not freak out. It's not. Okay. So Frost lets me do 2 of 3, 7 of 9, 999 of 1,000, etc. But we don't really need that flexibility for this project, do we? Like for this particular problem, at least at this time, it's always going to be a 2 of 2, right? So we don't really need like the additional complexity or whatever kind of benefit that you get from Frost. Using 2, on the other hand, only works for 2 of 2 or 3 of 3, etc. Right? So the general idea is that if we use music 2, we can get this nice 2 of 2 property. So nice things. Maybe Art knows a little bit more about other nice things about music 2 compared to Frost. But we get this 2 of 2 thing already. I think it's a little farther along in terms of implementations than Frost. Like there already exists a music 2 library in SIG is my understanding, so it's like kind of available. It achieves our 2 of 2 or 3 of 3 goals. I think it might be a little more efficient in terms of how much talking you have to do to your buddy that you're signing a signature with than Frost is. But I could be wrong about that, don't quote me. Cool. And so one of the downsides though is that the nonces are a little more complicated. Cool. Okay. So as you can imagine, the people who are making Taproot happen for Lightning decided to use music 2 to update to a music 2 script, etc. Okay. Cool.
Was that the right decision?
I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that the correct decision? Maybe we can get into that. I don't really walk through how it works exactly, and we can come back to it. Yeah, okay, cool. So maybe we can talk, so we're gonna use music 2, we're gonna update the scripts to music 2. So in order to do this, we need to update the Lightning protocol, right? So we've decided that we're gonna do music 2. In order to make a music 2 signature, you really are gonna need, there's now like some information that you need to exchange with your channel peer, right? In order to create a signature. So prior to music 2, so like currently Lightning, right? Currently Lightning, what happens? Currently Lightning, when I want to make a signature for this 2 of 2, how much communication do I have to make with my channel peer? Like how many times do I have to talk to them in order to produce a valid signature? How much, yeah. I mean, so I was going to say, I don't really have to talk to my channel peer. If I know what kind of transaction, if I know the message that I'm signing, right, the transaction that I'm signing as a partner, as a node in Lightning, I don't really need, I think, correct me if I'm wrong about this, I don't need to talk to anyone to produce a valid signature because I can come up with a nonce and I can use my private key to produce a valid signature for that message without having to get data or information from anyone else, right? So the current day, whenever you go to sign a closing transaction or a commitment transaction, you can mostly sign them independently, right? Does that make sense? Independently. Okay, so when we move to music 2, right? Because music 2, now you need inputs from both parties to produce a signature, right?
What are the inputs?
Okay, great.
easier counterparty to sign a refund transaction.
That's exactly what we're talking about, yes. So in order to produce that signature for the refund transaction or commitment transaction, as they're called in the protocol, we're gonna need to talk, right? So it used to be I would know what that refund transaction was. The current used to be is current day, right? It's current day lightning. I know what the refund transaction looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use my private key and the message, which is the refund transaction, and I can come up with a random nonce by myself, and I can produce a valid signature, and I can send that to you, right? I don't have to talk to you before I do that. I just, once I know what the message is, I can sign it, right? Music too, yeah.
What do you mean by updating lightning? Is it opening a channel or updating the balance or?
Good question. You should come to my lightning protocol. I'm doing a lightning class tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit more through how the contracts work. I guess right now we kind of generalize it away from lightning. It's that, let's say we're opening a channel, for example, so that's a good one. Well,
Or let's just say we're trying to create a music to signature.
we're creating a general music to signature for any message. So this is independent from lightning. If we add it to lightning, we're going to need to be making music to signature. You can abstract it away a little farther and be like, okay, I want to make this music to signature. Arik and I are making, we have a transaction that we locked up to our joint music to pub key. Now we want to be able to spend that money, right? So we need to make a signature that proves that we didn't spend it. What kind of communication and information do Arik and I need to communicate back and forth with each other in order to produce a signature that's valid, right? This is, again, if we just use an object sig thing, Arik could produce a signature, I could produce a signature without talking to each other, and then we send it to a central point, they put it together and publish it, right? So this is like what we're updating from. New version, now in order to make a valid signature, there's some data that I have to get from Arik before I can make a good valid signature, partial signature then, right? So we're still gonna have like two signatures at the end that we have to combine together to make it spendable. But before I can do that, now I have to get information from Arik, right? That's the whole thing. Okay, so what information am I getting from Arik? This is the open question. I think that's open-ended, right? Yeah. So what information am I going to need in order to produce the signature that I need? Yes. A nonce. Yes, I'm going to need a nonce. I think that's right. Multiple nonces. A set of nonces. I believe it is a set of nonces for me. Exactly.
Right. Can people describe the types of nonces that we need for music too?
Types of nonces. This is a quiz. Someone asked me if there's a quiz at the end. The answer is no, there's a quiz in the middle.
That's the thing is a quiz, right?
It's cool if you don't know any guesses. We don't need like quiz guesses, you know. It's the odds being right. Less than 50-50. Oh, no, maybe better than that. Set of nonces. So what types of nonces do I need? Deterministic? I don't think that's good. There's a mic behind it if you want to grab that, by the way, Arik. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but I think can you hear me well?
Yes. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
that works.
Cool. Okay, why don't you tell us, Arik, what kinds of nonsense do we need?
Yeah, so I think that it would be easier to describe what a music to signature looks like, and
Okay.
the thing is that in order to create a music to signature, we do need nonces from multiple parties, and the nonces actually look like this. So if Lisa and I, or Alice and Bob, I'm Alice because if Alice and Bob are trying to create a music to signature with one another, what Alice and Bob each generate is a set of nonces that are distinct. So Alice creates two random nonces. So let's call the first one Alice's nonce prime, and the second one Alice's nonce prime prime. And Bob generates the same thing. Bob has Bob's nonce prime and Bob's nonce prime prime. Does that ring a bell, or are people remembering what a?
It's interesting that it's two nonces per person.
Yeah, there are two nonces per person, and the way that the Schnorr signature works is, so a standard Schnorr signature, right? There you have the S, where we're disregarding the S is simply the private key times the challenge plus the secret nonce, and the R is the secret nonce times the generator point. In music 2, the nonce point is actually slightly more complicated than that, because in music 2, the nonce is a linear combination where we have the sum of the nonces prime, and we have the sum of the nonces prime prime, and the nonces prime prime are multiplied with a specific coefficient. And that specific coefficient is actually calculated by hashing hashing the nonces that we have here partially, as well as the message and the resulting public key. So it looks.
Yeah, you can use that.
Okay. I hope I'm not ruining anybody's banana. So because we have this slightly more complicated aggregation, where we want to make sure that neither Alice nor Bob are able to create adversarial nonces, we have to have this coefficient that makes it such that it is hash-based, and anytime either party modifies any one of their nonces, it suddenly changes the entire linear coefficient, and you can and anything adversarial that you may have tried beforehand would immediately be invalidated. Yes.
Sorry, just to make sure I'm right, the RA where R prime is those show right?
That's way to go, right?
You said the A and B should be capitalized?
I guess, yeah, the A could be capital. The R is capitalized for the public nonce. I don't think it really.
I was just copying the notation that I had been using up here. So the two nonces that Alice makes are A and are A prime, and then you add them together to sum up to get, right? And that's very
No, I'm just checking my what it's saying. Those are public keys.
No, so RA is a point. It's a public nonce, so it will be a point. And the RA prime is kind of considered that as like a single. It's not like I'm multiplying things together. That's just a single object, right? It's kind of just how I'm writing it in stuff. So RA prime is going to be this RA prime here. I think is the question. This isn't a This is just a single point, right? It's a point. Yeah. It's a point, and the RA is like, the prime is like, I think the way Arik wrote it is like a subscript. That's sort of a little hard to do on here.
Yeah,
So.
the reason we're using prime and prime prime is because each party sends two nonces. So distinguishing between the first nonce and the second nonce using prime and prime prime just seemed like the intuitive way of keeping track of them. And we add up all of the prime nonces into just an indeterminate, unowned R prime, and we add up all the prime prime nonces into R prime prime, which doesn't belong to any specific individual. It's just you can imagine that as vector search. If we have a matrix where we have the first and the second nonces columns, and each participant being a row, we simply add up all the nonces in a given column, and that is R prime, and then the second column, that is R prime prime. And those are then used as part of the preimage of the hash that we then use as the coefficient.
Okay, so the C here is this kind of the commitment?
The C is the nonce coefficient.
Nonce coefficient, my bad.
Where, I believe there is something I wrote down on a piece of paper which describes exactly what the coefficient, how the coefficient is right.
I see. Okay, here, I'll put it up here so you guys can see it. C is.
Is it fair to say that RA prime and RD prime are nonce commitments, not the nonces themselves? Because of points and not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Or you could also distinguish between public nonces and secret nonces. That's the terminology I think is still a little bit vague, especially.
They're sharing the public nonces, right? They're not sharing each other's secret nonces.
No, they're not. Those are secret. Yeah. Yes.
This is the feedback. RA prime is a point, X and Y. RB prime is also a point, X and Y.
Yeah, the public nonce is a point. The secret nonce is, of course, just the beginning there.
So you add the X's of each. That's right. How do you add these? a RA prime and RB prime?
Well, they're points in the middle of the curve. You just
You
build up
add
the curve
points.
point addition.
But in a standard single sig piece, you say old school signature, the nonces are not secret, right? You can't.
Nonce is secret. So the way that you make it, I mean, we can walk through how easy signatures made. That's fun. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember how these
But
things they were.
Okay. Generally, so like the general idea when you're making, or maybe we should do general Schnorr, right? So non-fancy music to Schnorr, like generally. So the way that you make a Schnorr signature is going to be, so like usually you say something called S. Typically, the idea is that you have something called little r plus your secret key, which is x times UHG. I feel like I'm like a little bit off here. I think there's some extra data that I'm missing here. Maybe this is like the message times message. Yeah, I think that's right. Great, okay. Close. Okay, yeah. So, what value here is the nonce? R, that's right, that's where the cursor is. R is the nonce. Why do we add a nonce to the signature of the secret times the message? Because S is going to be public. This is going to be public information. Everyone's going to be able to see this. So just like this is Schnorr. This is the Schnorr. This is very simple. Yes. Schnorr is much easier to say. Yes.
Is it one equation to know if it's not solvable?
That's right. Yeah. Because the problem is if I didn't have this and I knew what the message was, if I send Arik a message and ask message to make me a Schnorr signature, if Arik just takes his private key and multiplies it times the message and sends me back S, right? Because S is public. How much work is it going to take me to figure out what his private key is? What would I need to do to find his private key?
You just need to do division.
What?
Scalar division.
I would just divide it by the message that I sent him, and now I know what his magic private key is, right? That's not very secure. So the way we make this secure magic, we add a little random number to it called R, right? So this R is the secret nonce in this situation. So this is the secret. And again, remember how earlier I was saying before, without music 2, Arik can independently sign any message he wants. He gets to pick his own private nonce, little r, and he uses the message. Let's say everyone already knows what the message is that we're signing. So that's like already figured out. All he has is the message, so he's already got the message. He's gonna pick a random nonce. He's not gonna tell anyone what that secret nonce is, right? What he is gonna tell me, the other part of a signature, so that I'm putting it in brackets because it's public, right? He's gonna take that secret little nonce that he has and he's gonna multiply it times G to make a point, right? So these two pieces,
That's the bottom one is not a scalar one. Multiplication.
it is scalar multiplication. Yeah, the generator point. Yeah. R is, so R, the x coordinate of the R is what you're going to tell people that the x coordinate of this point R is what you're going to send to someone, and this becomes the well-known RS of any signature, right? Maybe this is new information to people. This is information. Great. Okay. Cool. Okay, so one of the things that we're working on now is how do we get, so we're making a signature with music too, right? So when, I'm sorry?
Should it be capital R?
Yeah, yes. So typically in annotation they call this K just because that way it's, I don't know what, I don't. X of R is really what's going there, and they just say, numbers here, it's be bad, you're right, okay, this is R's X value, whatever. So, ish, okay, in that direction. But this K is a secret thing, right? So this is a secret. No one needs, if you tell anyone what it is, you're pretty much in trouble. Here's another fun fact that I think we're gonna work through the math, is if you reuse a nonce. So if I use the same K and I sign a different message with the same nonce, I think it'll also lead to your private key.
Yeah, we can actually work from that.
So let's work through that math. Okay, so let's work through what happens if, so just using the simple equation.
I just call it R and it's more here.
I'm sorry, there's a question.
R is awesome.
That's one word for it, yeah. If you like losing money, you're getting caught. I don't know, okay, that's bad. Okay, okay, so the math that we're gonna do is, okay, so what happens in any normal Schnorrs, the same thing happens in BCD, the math is slightly more complicated. But what happens if I reuse K? So K is, again, my secret nonce. K is the secret nonce. It's a different message, right, Arik? You can use
It's a different message.
It's a different message. So what happens if I use secret nonce? Okay, so this is the equation. Again, S is in brackets because that's going to be the public information, right? That's something you're going to tell to people, you're going to put it in the blockchain, everyone's going to be able to see it. It becomes well-known information to everyone. Okay, so if I have, I'm going to put a little like 1 after this because this is the first time I'm doing it, right? So the message is going to be, the message and the nonce, etc. So someone sends me a message and I sign it. I pick a random nonce. I multiply my private key times the message and add a little secret nonce to it, and then I produce this S1, which I'm going to send everyone. And then the same person sends me a second message, but for some reason, I don't know, handmade, I just like to use the same nonce, secret nonce. Does everyone see these equations up here like this? Okay, so what happens if the person who sent this to me gets S1, S2, and message. So they have, so at the end of the day, the person who sent these messages will have M1 and S1, right? Yeah. Oops. And they'll also have M2 and S2. So everyone can see that that's the information the person asked me to sign this as. Okay. So, yeah.
Actually, quick question ahead of time. How would a recipient know, how would a recipient be able to tell that the same nonce was being used? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, because the R will be the same, right? So this means that when I return, because the signature is always, remember there's this R value that you return, and the signature is always both these parts. So if you get 2 signatures, so sig 1 and sig 2 would be composed of S1 and then R1, and then this would be S2, but the R1 would still be the same, right? Because R is using, you use the secret key times the same point. So if you get a signature with 2 of the R's are the same, you basically just won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. So lottery winning is if you get a signature and the R values are identical. Congratulations, that Bitcoin is now yours. Great. Okay, so let's show how this works. So you, on the other end, have M1, R1, and R1, right? So this is what you're starting with. All right, where do we go from here,
Yeah, well, yeah, let's do that. Let's do the subtraction. What do we subtract?
S1 minus S2.
S1 minus S2, okay. What else?
Well, I guess I can.
What is this? This is going to equal something. X times M1 plus K1, right? So if I just copy these down here, right?
K1 passes out.
Right? So everyone see how I got from up there to down here? Okay. Cool. Great. So we have this. So this equals S1 minus 1 plus 2, which we know the value of, right? So we can compute what this is. And then what happens over here?
K1 cancels out.
The K1 cancels out. Why does it cancel out? Okay, let's do some algebra. I love algebra. Who else likes algebra? Everyone loves algebra. I can get rid of this and make all these negative, right? That's what they want to do, except this is still multiplied times this. I'll just keep it like that. And then this is still multiplied by this, and then these go away. So K1 is here, K1 is also here. Those nonces were what keeping us safe, right? Everyone remembers that? We had like you added the nonce in, it was magic, it kept us safe from prying eyes that wanted to figure out what our secret key is. But now we've made 2 messages with the same nonce, and they're able to do some magic math and get rid of it. That's not good, right? They just like basically go away. Okay. Okay, and then I think we move this to the other side, right? This goes, what do we do with this one?
Well, I think we could probably use the associativity.
Factor out x, you guys agree? Okay, thanks. You guys can factor x out. Everyone see that? Like that? Cool, and now I divide both sides by n1 and 2, so I put it over here. Wow, okay, that's pretty fun. And I was losing my favorite key with math. Does that everyone see how I move around? So yeah, see here. Okay, great. And so all you have to do is solve this equation. We already have all this information, right?
So that's what mine says.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot some brackets. Brackets have been installed. So this was the information that that's public, right? The message that was signed and the two signatures, nonce things. And we did some math, and now we know x, and x was what? Our secret key that we weren't allowed to leak, right? Okay, so does everyone understand why nonces are kind of, to a certain extent, fairly toxic? This is a current problem in Bitcoin and actually any crypto system. I think that's fair to say. Any crypto system that's using Schnorr is BSA and is using nonces. If you manage to convince someone to reuse a nonce, your secret key is as good as dead. Fun fact, at a hackathon in Houston a few years ago, I proved that this is still a problem on mainnet. If you publish, put Bitcoin into a UTXO, there are bots out there that will come and take your money. So if you want to lose some money, this is a great way to do it.
Is it just one bot or the two bots are BFing each other?
I don't know, we rerun the experiment and see how many bots there are.
Hackathon project.
Hackathon project, yeah. This is like, redo that one. So this is definitely still a problem. Okay, so how I'm not sure how companies use DSA. They're using the problem is that it's a, I don't know, core way of how the algorithm works, right? Is you have this little nonce that's hiding where your secret key is, right? Based on whatever message you have. Cool. Okay, so where should we go from here? Alright, should we move it back to VC2?
Yeah, I think so. So the thing about music too is, of course, there we have this way more complicated nonce calculation mechanism. We have this hash that creates this nonce coefficient that whose purpose is to make sure that there can neither be an adversarial non-selection by either one of the parties, and nor nor could there be a nonce that would end up being reused because one of the parties didn't update their nonce properly. So if we consider the fact that Lightning is unfortunately so far, but any about an asymmetric protocol, and that we have to sign both a local commitment eventually, as well as a remote commitment. And we take into consideration that we want to use one singular music2 signature. How risky is the whole nonce business? Can Alice just use, do we need to have multiple music2 steps, considering we're signing different messages, and considering that they are pretty much automatically are going to have, thanks. Oh, right. So the question is, can we use different, or do we have to use multiple separate music2 steps, even though we know that the messages for the local and the remote commitments are going to be distinct, and because the message is part of the nonce coefficient pre-image, therefore the nonce is also going to be distinct. This is kind of a really deep question, so we may want to write out the music2 map, show what exactly what exactly the coefficient looks like, and that way we could maybe figure out what sorts of risks we may or may not be running into by either choosing to use the same nonces that are, the same R prime prime, even though the final public nonce coefficient is going to be distinct, and therefore the final public nonce is also going to be distinct. Does that make sense? Because it's all kind of, I've been saying that without the whiteboard or the text backing me up, so it might be a little much.
I've been taking what you're writing, just so if that's helpful. I don't know. I think okay, so maybe what would be useful here is if we kind of talk through how nonces work in Music 2, and then start talking about kind of like the design space that we're working with in the like context, right? So I think one thing that we haven't really made clear yet, so we just went through how Schnorr works with nonces, right? And some of the downsides of reusing nonces and why that's bad on Schnorr, which is like the very simplest case. Music 2 is more complicated, as we've kind of mentioned before. That's because in order to make that final signature, so in order to do the Schnorr signature like equation that we just walked through, before you get there, you're going to need to build like what is called an aggregate nonce, which means that the nonce has a contribution. The nonce is derived from information that each signer comes up with independently, right? So in order to do like that final signature, we're going to need to get information about the other party's nonce before we're able to sign. Is that right, Arik?
Yes, it is.
Right, okay. So kind of one of the new challenges with new challenges, or kind of new requirements maybe is another word for thinking about it, for Schnorr, Music 2, is we're gonna need, before we can sign, we need nonce info from our peer. And then I kind of had a list somewhere in here of things you have to kind of watch out for, or things we're trying to design around. Now that we have to get nonce information from someone, so in the past you were able to just randomly pick a number and that was your nonce. As long as you were using good randomness, there was a high probability that you would never reuse the same nonce, right? You can make that a little stronger by always mixing in some extra random data, extra random data. Maybe adding a commitment to the sub key in the message, and as long as you never reuse the same key, etc., make it fairly strong guarantees that you're always using an independent nonce. As soon as that's like on the single signer situation, right? You can do some defensive things so that you're always using individual nonces. As soon as you start including someone else in the nonce selection process, right, which is what we're doing with Music 2, is that correct? That's the accurate summary of the situation here. All of a sudden, there's some new challenges such that you have to make sure they're not trying to send you a nonce that lets them kind of like back out their nonce later and figure out what your secret key was. So there's this opportunity for them to, or maybe they're being negligent and they're reusing a nonce. So these are some of the challenges that we're trying to design around. And this is actually one of the reasons that Music 1 got deprecated, is because there were some problems around nonce selection that allowed like an adversarial party to provide a nonce which would, in some cases, leak your secret key. So we've moved to a new protocol. The biggest difference between Music 1 and Music 2 is that now we use sets of nonces, which is why A has an R1 prime and B has an R2 prime. So now we use series of private and public nonces to compute the thing. Is one way to get around the problem, is my understanding. Okay, so do you want me to reset to where you are here? So
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me get that stuff really fast. Okay, so now we're gonna walk through how nonces work on RC2, on Music 2. So I'm gonna copy this and put it down here. Okay, so now we're here. Does this look familiar? We're sort of familiar with the logic that's going on here. Okay, so now a nonce, so now the big R, right? So this is gonna be like our public nonce. So I'm never gonna find out what my party's private secret nonces are. They're only gonna send me the public information from nonces they've chosen. So for Alice, that's gonna be, I missed the part for Alice's, let me go get that back.
You know what? Why don't we just create a little matrix or a table? That might help.
Okay.
That's why we have a pretty whiteboard here. So let's have Alice. Let's have Bob. Alice has RA prime and RA prime. Bob has RB prime, RB prime, and the sum of these is R prime. The sum of these. Oh, this is so much better.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
The sum of. So the first column is R prime. The second column is R prime prime. However, our final nonce is not just the sum of all four. It is R prime plus a special coefficient multiplied with R prime prime. And that coefficient is described here. I don't know if this is big enough, but you have it up here. So the coefficient is the hash of R prime and R prime prime, which are those column sums, plus, or concatenated with the public key and concatenated with the message. So if we think back to the asymmetric state that we have, where we have to sign the local commitment and the remote commitment, the messages are going to be different, and therefore the public-facing nonce is also going to be distinct because the coefficient is going to be different.
You're mixing in, so this is you're talking about the lightning case. So we're mixing in some information about how lightning works here. Arik is basically saying that whenever you're making these signatures, this message is going to be different. So since we're having different messages, and the message is used to figure out what the public nonce is, right? Because you include a hash of, so we made things a little more complicated. We're trying to make it such that our nonces are always unique. One way that we do that is taking a hash of the information that's involved in the calculation and multiplying it in. So that if any of that information changes, so for example, we include the message as part of the hash, that it gets multiplied into what the final nonce result is. So everyone kind of see how you put the message, then you hash it along with some other info, and that gives you C, and then you take C and you multiply it times one of the nonce values, and that gives you your final nonce. This means that if the message changes, because it's an input to this process, the final nonce will always be different, right? The R you get at the end will be different because we've changed the message. One second, yeah. And then what Arik was referencing is in the lightning situation. So the protocol is all about trying to design the lightning protocol, right? But we had to go on a long journey to the depths of nonce configurations to get there. In lightning, one of the situations you sign different messages. So the question is, if we're signing different messages and the message is an input to what the final nonce is, does that make it such that we can reuse our RA and RB values safely? Is that a
Yeah, that is exactly it.
Okay, great. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So can we? I don't know.
Well, that is actually a great question, and depends on your attack scenario. So, does anybody have ideas of what potential risks might be of reusing nonce values? Like, let's say Bob is a good boy and he always generates a new one, but Alice decides to keep using her same RA prime and RA prime prime.
So this is the, in this case, we have our negligent party Alice that's reusing the nonce, right? So
Yeah.
this is the situation we're talking about. Okay. So Alice is reusing her nonces and Bob is not. What happens then?
What happens then?
So the question was, could Bob solve for her private key?
And that is exactly it. So from a public-facing perspective, it's still pretty safe because the nonce is different. So a neutral observer would not know. However, if you think that your counterparty shouldn't have your private key because they're not you, then suddenly you do have that risk. If you're curious, we actually did work through the math of exactly how to reconstruct it. It's on this magical piece of paper. Trust me, it's all in there. Don't check it. But it is possible, and as it turns out, it's actually still quite simple. It simply becomes a slightly more complicated equation, but it's still a linear equation. You have to do 2 multiplication steps instead of 1 that we just had with Schnorr because you have an extra variable. But you do that, and you do a slightly more complicated subtraction and division. But Bob does ultimately end up with Alice's private key, and it's not.
Or Alice.
Thank you.
Alice ends up with it, right? If
No, Alice is the negligent party.
So if Alice reuses the nonces, Bob can get the key.
Bob gets her key.
Bob gets her. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so if Alice, Bob gets, Bob can find her. So this is really Alice's mistake, sort of.
Yeah.
Makes sense that Bob can see her stuff. We had a question here on the
Yeah,
front row.
just as one clarification, if you go up a little bit while you're calculating your coefficients, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So the data is the same as in the equation, but you are putting the order different, so this would create a different hash,
Oh,
right?
sorry. I was writing this from memory. So
Is it,
But
I don't know, is
But
the
I get
first
the
or
yeah,
is it-
the order is kind of, it's an implementation detail, so pay no attention to the order. The point is just that if it changes, the agreement changes, the hash changes.
Okay.
And one thing that maybe we should clarify is that a hash, we're using SHA-56. It produces a 256-bit value or a 32-byte value. Odds are pretty decent that it's going to be within the field order, and so all we simply do then is interpret that as a big integer within our finite field that we span our elliptic curve and top out. So that is what we treat the hash as a big integer, and that is what we simply use the hash output as a coefficient.
So basically you can convert a hash into an integer.
Yeah.
It's like the whole kind of trick there.
Yes.
Now what happens if Bob takes the negative of Alice's public key commitment? So can they negate nonces? I guess they can because they wouldn't have private key.
So Alice's public key commitment or Alice's nonce commitment?
Nonce commitment.
It was a question in class, just so.
So if Bob takes the negative of Alice's nonce commitment,
So Bob takes the negative of Alice's commitment,
we
so.
wouldn't know the private key of that nonce.
So you're saying if Bob takes the negative here? Okay, and then
Well, no, Alice takes RA and RA.
Right.
Prime with Bob takes negative RA.
Yeah, if Bob tries to choose adversarial nonces,
so that's the situation, so Bob tries to pick an adversarial kind of non-situation.
Yeah, so actually I think it's a great question. May I toss it back to the room? What would happen if Bob, here let me make this a little more prominent. What would happen if Bob tried to choose adversarial nonces? Let's say that Bob's RB prime equals negative RA prime, and Bob's RB prime equals negative RA prime.
Especially if Alice doesn't notice and produces her signature anyway.
What would an adversarial, so in this case, what would an adversarial nonce be exactly? It's, I'm sorry, I feel like you said that and it blinks. So Bob is picking something that makes the resulting R when we add them together here.
Yeah, something that you know is the private key. Like let's say Bob has RB prime and RB prime, but what Bob actually chooses after having received Alice's nonce is Bob chooses like the RB prime that he discloses to be his real RB prime sub RA prime.
Right, so basically he knows what the secret to R prime is then, right?
Yeah.
Because he's able to figure
R
out.
prime would be 0. If RB is minus RA, then your R becomes 0. Your R becomes also 0.
The point Arik is making is that there's another trick that Alice can't see it. So if it would be 0, Alice would see it, but if optics are
My
big
question
enough,
is, let's say,
he knows we can know R prime, but Alice can't even detect that.
but let's say Alice doesn't detect it,
Ah, yeah.
and it's 0. What happens then? Because that might be the easiest example to
Ah, yeah.
walk through. So Bob takes the negative of Alice's nonces, and they just keep going because Alice didn't notice that R prime and R prime are now 0. Or does the music protocol say that, stop when that happens?
Yeah, so what the music article does, it uses the nonces have to go into the coefficient. And because the resulting nonce is a linear combination, Bob, and analysis portion is still necessary. Bob would still not be able to unilaterally produce an adversarial signature because of this hash, because Bob would need to be able to produce a specific value that we evaluated to something depending on what the hash results to. So that is actually something that MUSIC2, the protocol, protects against.
Right, so just to kind of restate that so everyone maybe can hear, and I think the general idea is that so MUSIC2 is the thing that requires you to use this particular equation for calculating the shared nonce, right, the aggregate nonce. And part of the way that they updated it is that they added this hash of all this data into the calculation of the nonce, and that makes it such that it's very hard to backwards pick a adversarial nonce value on one side. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
I don't understand why, because I can just have 2 zeros there.
Well, the zeros for the infinity point, of course, would work. But even if Bob did have the private keys to both R prime and R prime prime, Bob would.
Bob might know the rate. So Bob might know R prime and R prime prime, but when you multiply and C, it creates a new kind of like R, right?
Well, the trick is that
is kind of confusing that R is R prime plus C times prime prime, because below there's a note which says R prime prime is multiplied by OFC. So I thought it should be R prime prime is C times R prime. So that's they combine it some way. Because now Bob can pick an adversarial R prime, and he can pick an adversarial R prime prime. That's not the goal, right?
Well, Bob picks a value, Bob picks 2 values, and Alice picks 2 values. Those get summed together to make R prime and R prime prime, right? So these 2 are a combination. So R prime here is a combination of a randomly picked point from A and a randomly picked point from B off that you've added together. Then R prime prime is the same. They've picked 2 second points and you've added the second point that they picked together. So these capital R's without the A after them, for example, are all, they're all sums of information that you've picked part of, you've contributed half of, and the other parties contributed another half, right? And then you take those 2 summed nonces and you multiply it by a hash of those 2 points aggregate nonces, internal nonces, sort of, I don't know that, plus like this other publicly plus the message, that produces a random value, right? A hash, cryptographic hashes like SHA-256 produce a random value depending on the input, right? It's deterministic in that if you put the same data into the hash, you always get the same answer, but that answer should be a random kind of choice out of the entire 256-bit field, right? So you basically produce a random kind of piece of information, which is derived off of the data that you're putting in. And so you multiply that random sort of like, I want to call it a spoiler. Like it kind of just spoils the math of it. You add in another form of randomness to what the final nonce, shared nonce is for this like signature. And that makes it such that even if Bob is able to adversarially pick what his inputs are to these shared values, those change what this hash value is, and being able to pick values that go into the hash that produces a hash, which then you know the secret key to, is very difficult.
I think we're actually missing something.
We're missing something. What are we missing?
Yeah, what picks is RP prime prime, such that R prime prime becomes the point at infinity, C times the point at infinity remains, I guess.
Yeah, but let's say that R prime worked, right? Bob cannot really control what the coefficient is, right? So Bob cannot really pick a specific nonce that is going to be part of the final commitment. However, that is going to be part of the final signature. However, Bob is going to know the discrete log solution to the final nonce because Bob does know R prime and R prime private keys because you pick those adversarially. And so then after the first signature with Alice, Bob might be able to produce. Would Bob be able to extract? I think, yeah, Bob might be able to subtract lowercase r and thereby extract out the aggregate private key. So I think we're missing something because that is exactly what the music is vertical is supposed to be.
That's right. The idea is if you take C and you remove it, here you say slash dash of R prime, then you leave the R prime prime out. I guess you can compute, you can make the mode proof that they have generated something random.
Cool. We've got about 10 minutes. Is there anything that we should so I think what we've shown is that being careful about what nonces you pick is important.
Yeah, and we should follow up about the musical details with a nonce calculation. That is.
I think the linear combination just doesn't work like that. You take the first nonce of Alice and then add it to the challenge times the second, and then you do the same with Bob's. But the challenge is different for Bob and Alice. You have like challenge 1 and challenge 2, I think.
No, the challenge is calculated based off the final result, because the way that Alice is able to create her partial signature is she calculates her Schnorr value by multiplying the hash of the message with her private key, and she adds lowercase ra prime and the coefficient that is ubiquitous across all of the r prime and r prime prime multiplied with lowercase r Alice's r prime prime, right? Because it has to be that it is Alice's r prime plus c times Alice's r prime prime and Bob's r prime plus c times Bob's r prime prime. That way the coefficient stays the same across the aggregation, and that way final nonce calculation also works. So there cannot be different coefficients for the different participants. The coefficients are most certainly constant across the entire set. Sorry? Well, yeah, but this is music too. In Frost, it's different because in Frost you have the Lagrange coefficient, and the Lagrange coefficient does depend on the participant's index. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking about the private key. Yeah, and
that's fine. But I think it's just one of the things. You have two different circuits. You just have something in there, like 1 and 2, and then you get 2 different challenges, and then you really need to keep in the overrides.
That doesn't match the white paper, but I'll verify.
Where's a good place for us I guess we put up info, I can tweet stuff out of Base58 Twitter, so we'll do maybe a follow up there with some actual maps that people want to follow along further. I've got 8 minutes left. We have a question here.
So when you say choosing an adversarial nonce, are you referring to the 2 sets? Like I'm Bob, I have my 2 that I need to exchange with Alice.
Yes.
Is this the point where I'm choosing an adversarial one? Or?
Yeah, against Alice.
That's right. Yeah, so the question was, at what point is the adversarial nonce chosen? I believe the answer is, so when Bob comes up with the RB prime, those are the nonces that he's picking. And in order to do that, Alice would have had to send her nonces over first, right? So you need knowledge of what Alice's nonces is. So the adversarial nonce selection case is only available to the party that is the second one. And it only happens in the case that they get the nonces from Alice before they're required to send Alice their nonces, right?
Yeah, assuming the math is right.
Assuming the math is right.
Yeah, and
that's short is getting at, is that like one
I'm doubting that right now.
negative of what I got?
Right. I think that's part of the I believe that's part of it. I could be wrong about that. But cool. We want to take more questions. We want to maybe quickly sketch out how the Lightning protocol works in theory. I don't know what you guys think. We got 5 minutes.
Or we can open the music to white paper and
I can do that too.
figure
Yeah.
out what we're doing wrong, because I think that is the most
I don't know how the internet's working, but we can really quick when to say PDF maybe, see what that gets us. 7 minutes running. Maybe we'll stop like 3 minutes early this weekend. Is it this one here? I have card. I don't know what I have card is. Music 2, simple. 2 round Schnorr multi-signature situation going on here. Okay. Okay, cool. Does that work? People see that?
Yeah.
Jonas, Tim, and Yannick from Blockstream, and I think. Where should we head to? Should I just keep scrolling? Can you tell me this?
Let's see if we can find the description of it.
Background on multi-signatures, that's cool. Music scheme, wow. 2 round schemes, following the scheme by Valer and Evan. Our contribution, that's cool. Some new stuff. Comparing Music 1 and Music 2. Oh no, Music 2 and Music 2 star with other discrete log-based multi-signature schemes. What else have we got in here? Discrete log security proof, concurrent work. There's nothing particular I'm looking for. Technical overview, that seems like it. So there's some challenges in constructing 2 round schemes. It says the oh, maybe I should move over a little bit, that's better. Concrete attacks. Let's do guessing rules,
Our solution, that was promising, right?
Promising, our solution. Yeah, I think this is where they do the series of nonce things. So, main novelty in our work is to let every signer I send a list of nonces. Right, so this is what I was saying, that to fix it, they changed it from being a single nonce contribution to a list of nonces from each pair, and this is where you get the, remember we had the 2 R's that we were adding together? That's the biggest change between, my understanding, that's the biggest change between Music and Music 2, is that there's now a list of nonces. We got a hand in the back.
Yeah, but it's describing it the same way.
Music 1 exchanges the hash of the R's first.
Okay.
So it's 3 rounds, not 2 rounds.
Yes.
So basically the history here is that the Music 1 frequent paper was just 2 rounds. And then somebody pointed out that it's possible to attack these 2 rounds using, I forgot the name of that attack. Birthday type of attack.
Wagner's birthday word attack.
Wagner?
I think it's in the paper readers.
Yeah. But so they added the 3rd round of exchanging the hash of the R's first.
Right. That's so you can't change it later, so you can't adversarially pick it on.
And because it's a hash, you don't know what the R of the other side is.
Right. There's no negative of the hash, right?
But that's the original Music. That's how they fixed it. Music 2, they wanted to go back to being 2 rounds, which is why there's a 2 in the number. So they needed to be able to make it such that you can't adversarially pick a nonce. My understanding is that the way that they did that is with this list of nonces, which is, it says the main novelty is let every signer send a list of nonces, right?
And
At least 2, where the number of nonces you're sending is at least 2, right? So
they are non-linear combination.
I don't know what that means. So scalar B is derived via the hash function applied to the nonces of all signers, where you have, right, that's your challenge. This is the C that we were talking about earlier, where we had that hash that we took of the nonce, the aggregate nonces, and message, and the pub key, yep.
And then we have the message.
And then we have B, and then where do we go from here? I'm missing something. Okay, so when the adversary tries different results for the second nonce, R2, so their RV2, the coefficient changes, and so does on the signer's effective nonce. This ensures that the sum of the signer's effective nonces taken over all of the sessions is no longer a constant value. Constant error. Just the adversary lacks essential prerequisite, and the definition of the generalized birthday problem and Wagner's algorithm is not applicable. Cool. Okay. It's tempting to fall back to only a single nonce, instead just rely on the coefficient B. However, then the adversary can effectively eliminate B by redefining the aggregate nonce as R1, which is independent of all BK during the equation. Instead of equation 1 perform the attack. Right. So I think we have the equation correct, I believe. Stuff, but I don't see it in here.
Yeah, then we need to figure out why the attack is not supposed to work, because mathematically it seems to be checking out. let's make that our
Homework.
our homework.
Alright, cool. Alright, thanks all for coming. We're gonna take a short break while we get our next speaker up, which is right here, Zeman. We'll be talking about, let me pop open Zeman class. So next up, we're gonna have Zeman. He's gonna be talking about multi-participant off-chain mechanisms from now until 12:30. So 2-minute break, and then we'll be back. Thank you, everyone.